Yeah, you can stay where you want to. All right, we'll get this Transportation Committee called to order. And if y'all would bow your heads, we'll say a brief prayer. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just come before you now, as humble as we know how, Lord, asking for forgiveness of all our sins, Lord. Lord, we pray as we go about deliberating, doing the people's business, that you would guide us in our decisions. And Lord, that what we do would be pleasing unto you. We pray for those that are sick and afflicted that we've heard about over this last couple of weeks. Pray that you'll just lay your hands down upon them. We also pray that you'll be with those that are traveling, especially in the weather that we're having. Lord, in Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. All right. Having said that, now we are going to, just for the committee's understanding, we will meet again next Tuesday. Don't we have room Tuesday, and then we'll finalize at that time our road namings. So if you know anybody that don't have them in, make sure they get them in by then so that we can get them added to the Senate bill as it comes over to the House. Having said that, this time, Representative Nimmer, the governor's floor leader on House Bill 1087. Representative Nimmer.
Hello. All right. Might be my first bill. I don't know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and all of my friends that have showed up here today for this conversation starter. This bill, I know, has struck a lot of talk and conversation, and just what I said is just what it is. The bill was dropped late in the session. Much as y'all heard Chairman Roberts the other day, for those that were here, he introduced a measure that was strictly to get a conversation going to find out how to address an issue, and that's what we seek to do with House Bill 1087. It is a response from me, driven by my friends at the railroad who feel that we need to be able to haul heavier loads up and down the road. Just making sure they're here and awake. There he is. I just want to make sure everybody can smile in this committee here and today. What I want to do is have a good, healthy, and robust but not overly spirited conversation on how we can address hauling raw products in Georgia. More weight isn't always the answer. I've said that from day one. We've got a lot of internal issues with dimensions, routing of trucks, and different things that need to be on the table, discussed thoroughly, and vetted out properly, as we always do in this committee and other committees. So what the bill says is that we seek to do is strike the 80,000 pound weight limit and move it to 89.5, but we added in language that to reach that goal, you would purchase under the commissioner's discretion a permit to be able to haul that of the fee that we just penciled in at $200. My hope would be that money, while we can't say where it goes, would go to upgrade maybe some equipment that DOT would need, or for other advancements in testing of bridges, or looking at different things that may create an issue with hauling more weight. I think one thing we all understand is there are trucks that run heavier up and down our roads that are not raw products haulers. And what we seek to do is, as we look at deepening our ports and recognizing that the top two exports out of the Savannah ports are byproducts from our natural resources here in Georgia, we want to make sure that we give some equalization and parity and competitiveness to these trucking companies that are fighting higher insurance rates, higher labor wages, higher input costs for tires, springs, brakes, motors, tractors, trailers. Everything they touch is going up except their payload capacity. I do not in any way seek to make the roads of Georgia more dangerous. I want to make that clear, and I want to be on record saying that. I've got a wife and 3 beautiful children and extended family and friends that travel these roads in Georgia, and I want to make sure above anything that we're safe. One thing I want us to look and have a good conversation about is, as we seek to increase weights, that we don't go too heavy, that we keep trucks safe, that we've got the best technology and equipment on these trucks and trailers to handle the loads that they're hauling. I also want to make sure that if we're increasing weights, it's reducing the number of trucks on the road. With a state running nearly 10 million people now and growing at a rapid rate, the two things we've got to move, and I've said it many times, I've heard it said, we got to move people and product. And in an agriculture and timber-driven state, we got a lot of product to move. The people, we're glad to have them, but they're not always happy about the number of trucks running up and down the road and the trucks they get behind. So we want to make them safer, more efficient, and hopefully less numbers of them on the road so that they can get the equal amount of products to the marketplace and eventually to a consumer to keep our economy going. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I think the bill is pretty simple. It's about as simple a bill as can create as much conversation as one can do. And I'll be glad to take questions from the committee or however you want to do it, sir.
Okay, let's listen to others that are out here that may have, shouldn't say issues, but rather some comments concerning the legislation. I only have one person signed up. I know there's some others. Tommy Carroll, where do you want to come and sit at? Do you want to stand or you want to? No, you can't. You got to speak into the mic. We're on TV. It don't matter. It's up to you. You can either sit or stand. Well, then you're going to have to stand. You got to go all the way over here.
First of all, identify myself. My name is Tommy Carroll. I'm Executive Director of the Southeastern Wood Producers Association. We're a 24-year-old organization that represents the logging companies of both Georgia and Florida. We have roughly about 350 logging companies that we serve in this state, including Representative Nimmer's company. And just want to say that I admit I was caught off guard, but having thought through this, I want to thank Representative Nimmer and Chairman Roberts for getting this issue up. It's been obviously for transportation about 40% of my job, it seems like. So I appreciate it getting on the table so all the parties can maybe come together at a later date and see what we can work out that's reasonable, because that's my job to represent these companies, and just want to be on the record that I'm on board to help any way I can. So,
any questions for Mr. Carroll? All right. Josh? This can get interesting. Wait a minute, I don't think you signed up to speak. So
I got a pen right here if I need to walk up there.
No, go ahead, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the the fact that you introduced at this point in the session to promote a conversation. I think for the department, we just don't look at every bill as just an individual bill, but sort of want to just talk sort of generally about our concerns as we look at some of the weight bills that come up. I think obviously as a department, we don't want to be in a position where we have to oppose these things, but ultimately for us, we see as part of our goals promoting economic development in the state, as well as moving people and goods throughout the state. The challenge though is we look at these individual bills, we have to weigh that against the resources we have to maintain the roads. When you talk about the permit fees, statutorily those things do not go back into maintenance. Statutorily, we're allowed to only retain that amount of the fee that pays for actual issuance of the permits. The remainder of that actually leaves the department. But certainly we want to continue this conversation. I thought just for purposes of today, our chief engineer is here, and he's going to sort of just walk through some of the concerns so that as we have this conversation, things that we can balance, figuring out what needs to be, what's the statutory way forward, or there's some ways that we can work together outside of any statutory changes to try and get you where you are. I think we have to balance all sorts of concerns, but besides just being able to increase the payload, it's what are the effects of that and how does that impact the industry as well. I think trying to achieve the right balance so that everyone understands what the consequences could be, because it may be a better proposition to have a lower payload, but maybe more options in terms of routes. So without that, Russell McMurray is our chief engineer, and I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Josh. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. Representative Nimmers, thanks for the opportunity for the discussion, and we do appreciate that. And as Josh said, I think balance is key, and Representative Nimmers, as you said, I mean, sort of those three tenets was economic competitiveness throughout this state, which is vital, and we get that at the Department of Transportation. That's to safely move people and goods, and the goods part is very critical. And the safety point you addressed as well, so we appreciate the notion of that whatever happens, whatever comes forward, safety is paramount. That's important. My 3 kids and my extended family as well. That certainly resonates well with me. And then the third part, I think you mentioned was, maybe this turns into less trips, and that's important too, because I think when you talk about economy, you talk about efficiency and being effective. So the more efficient it can be, the better for business and goods. That's good for the state, and we certainly want to be on that page. But what I'd like to do just a little bit is set the table about why we even have concerns, and anytime weight bills comes up, and we need to sort of ground ourselves back in the reality of what the conditions of our assets for this state are. And as I talk about this, we have to remember this is not just GDOT we're talking about. We're talking about all the local routes, which are much more than what we have as a state agency. So it's a state. This is a statewide discussion, but as a DOT, we take the responsibility to review every 2 years all the bridges of this state, including the big box culverts that are considered bridges. So to have a really good understanding of the condition. And so that's really where the conversation about any loads come in, is we have already 1,800 bridges that are posted that have some restriction on them. And the reason that they have postings are bridges are just like the fleet of vehicles that use the bridge. They come in all shapes and sizes. They come in all makes and models from different years, and they were designed to do different things. So it's the bridges are sort of like the vehicles that use them. With that being said, a lot of the bridges were designed way back in the day, we'll say, to haul or transport or be able to carry a lot different vehicles than we have today. So they inherently have sort of a design flaw in them. And so because they were maybe not designed to carry the weights that exist today. Secondly, it's sort of like your vehicle, is that how hard have you driven your vehicle, And so each bridge has its own story, its own life, in fact, that they have been used in different ways. And especially the more they are used, just like your car, the more wear and tear on them. So that gets in their condition. So it's really the strength, how the bridge was designed, the condition of the bridge, and the loads that go across them determine their ability to haul loads and to take a load legally or what have you across that bridge. That bridge can only hold so much load. So that's how we get into the 1,800 bridges of this state that are currently posted.
Listen, let me ask you a question
Yes,
real
sir.
quick.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Right now, how many bridges would you say, roughly in the state of Georgia, that are either beyond repair or need repair?
Well,
when I say beyond, I mean closed. I mean, do you have that?
Close, not off the top of my head. I don't actually close, but what happens is bridges fall into either functionally obsolete, which is sort of like buying the computer. Your computer 5 years ago is no good today. Usually that's because they're narrow. They're just not designed to today's standards. And they probably weren't designed to carry the load. So out of those, I'm going to ask Ben, do you know how many functionally obsolete and structurally deficient? Percentage-wise, it's pretty fair, Mr. Chair. Ben's looking to get that number off the top of my head, but we're talking 1,800 currently posted out of 9,000. That means they have a load issue. But to answer your question is, there's bridges that we would replace if funding was available because they're just jalopies. You go back to the car analogy. So, but those are different. Not all those have strength components. Some of them are satisfactory to carry loads and may not be posted, but they're in need of replacement because of age.
Representative Nimmer.
Yeah, if you don't mind, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, how often did you say you test the bridges? Every 2 years?
Every bridge has an inspection on a 2-year cycle.
How are they, and forgive me for not knowing, how do you inspect a bridge to know the weight capacity it can take?
Well, we have bridge inspectors that go out and basically pour over the bridge, look for all the deficiencies, the cracks, and a lot of times the deficiencies, when you drive over them, you don't see them. They're what's underneath. They're the structural strength part of what we call the substructure and what's below ground oftentimes. Now, they do the inspection, and that data goes into the determination of when the loads are calculated, which is not done in the field, it's done by engineering, our folks with engineering that go out, they look at the design of what the bridge theoretically should be able to carry as it was designed, and then you do basically a deduction based on the deficiencies that you find. If you find concrete cracking, a lot of times the deterioration of pile and support, you reduce that capacity. So it's a two-part process: the field inspection to get the real-time data of what's out there, and then the calculation part then with reductions. And again, it's a theoretical calculation of you're taking what you know it should carry and reducing that amount.
So, Mr. Chairman, another question, sir. So the two-part test, if I understand right, you go out and you're not mechanically testing or hooking any kind of digital X-ray imagery into a pilot or something. You're out there just visually looking at it, making notes, and then coming back and your engineers inputting that data, and that generates what the load capacity or the wear of that bridge may be.
That's correct. We actually do. That's for the majority. I'd say 99%. That's how bridges are determined if posting is needed. However, though, we do go out and actually we've got a project underway now to go out and do the sensors, and you're testing the actual strain or the stress in the bridge when traffic's driving over it to get sort of what are those real numbers, and then you compare that back to what's the theoretical. Sometimes, and part of that, we've worked with Tommy Carroll and his bunch, and we're working with Georgia Forestry Commission as well to try to do that on some of the routes from the operation to the mill, trying to determine if some of those postings can be released a little bit. So we're just getting underway actually, and hope to see what the benefits of that are. But that's a process, in fact, that if you happen to see the loads and the strain that's undesirable, that even gives you more concern. It's sort of trying to think of an analogy of you're getting real-time data, which is good, but if it's going the wrong way, that's bad because that bridge is experiencing more load than it should have on it too. It tells you two different stories potentially.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask you something.
Hit your button on the back there. The back of the microphone.
Right.
There you go.
I'll let the mic handle me. But I wanted to ask you something. About 12 years ago, when I first got here, I heard about the problem with bridges, etc. Forestry is a big part, I don't need to tell you that, of our economy. It's a particular big part of my part of this state. Have you all got an update on what you've done about bridges you talked about 12 years ago needing repair? Are you making any progress? Where are we? Somewhere there's got to be a common ground, because we can't continue. We've all got to grow. And if we've got a problem with roads, what are you planning on doing about them, and what's your schedule, and what have you done over the last 12 years on the bridges?
Well, certainly, and let me just first comment on forestry. I grew up with my father was in the forestry industry, so I certainly understand, and grew up at an early age understanding the importance of forestry and what it means to this great state. So I certainly have appreciation of that. For what we do is with federal funding, and that's what it takes. That's how we get capital projects done. We're able to do basically 20 to 30 bridge replacements a year. Now, I just said there's 1,800 that's posted. Now, that's not that you ever get caught up, even if you could catch that up, because the bridge that's built today is just like anything, ages and deteriorates over time. The good thing is that you can see out of 9,000 bridges of this state, and again, the lion's share of these are not on state routes. We only have 93 bridges that are posted on state routes. The balance, 1,700 or so, are on local roads, county roads, city streets, mainly the county roads. So what it is we have a continual program over and over to just keep working with the local governments to replace these bridges. Now, obviously, that math, you don't catch that up with that kind of thing. And on the federal level, under the last federal transportation bill, they actually did away with the formula amount of money that was dedicated to bridges. So the money that's going to local bridges, and Toby Carr, our Director of Planning, has maintained what that previous funding amount was, but it competes with every other federal dollar that's out there now. Now that's the good news, is we're staying on that funding level, but however, we're not gaining ground. You know, we're going to stay status quo, to answer your question, is about where we are as it relates to funding. And federal transportation is a whole nother committee meeting, I think, or conversation. So hopefully I answered your question. But as you think, as I talked about, going back to sort of the how we get here with postings, and what we've done is taken a very quick stab at those conditions, and then what the proposed bill is to 89.5, and to take a look at what that means, because my first notion was, okay, what does that mean from being efficient? So when we looked at that, there's additional, almost 570 additional bridges that would be restricted from use with a permit. And so I've got Ben, if you would, we got a map. You know, I'm a graphic person. Maybe they're just dots on the map, but you got to start thinking about what those restrictions are going to do, and then does it make it an efficient trip? And obviously we hadn't had enough time, and I think this is why we have a conversation, that we can further the conversation. Maybe if you'll carry that up and just get to the chair or lay there and pass around. It's sort of...
I tell you what, to the committee members, I actually have this map in smaller form in my office. Isn't that...
This is updated just as of an hour ago, probably.
Okay. Well, you can get me that.
Yes, sir.
And I'll make copies and get to y'all versus trying to hang that up.
Okay. Well, and again, I think at this point, as the engineers are calculating and trying to understand what this means, because it is that sort of two-part component to understand the loads, you have to look and to decide, and I think the question becomes, does that become efficient if you have that restriction now that with the increased weight, you're going to have to drive around? And does that make sense? And the answer is that we don't know. I think that's something that we continue the conversation with, and again, try to make sure that that it's an efficient and effective and a safe route, that when you do have to route vehicles due to the increase for loads. And I guess one of the things that I think at least it's hard to get your arms around is just a little bit more weight, but what does that really mean? And I'll give you a real corny example, and I hope it works, is this paper clip was designed to have enough pressure on it to keep paper together. And that's the way it was designed. But if I unfold it, and I just put just a slightly little bit of pressure on it, and I'm only putting a little bit on it over and over, and y'all know what's going to happen, right? It's going to snap. Hopefully it does, if my example would work. So there it goes. So that increased loading has a acceleration of deterioration on bridges. You don't see it immediately. It's not instantaneous. It's not a bridge collapse. Okay, we're not talking about when you get to safety, it's not a bridge collapse, but it's a repeated over and over. That increased weight, where they were never designed for that, just causes them to deteriorate more, which goes back to your point of what are we doing about it, and we're sort of maintaining status quo now. So, Mr. Chairman, just from an overview from the department. Again, we're very appreciative for being here to have a conversation, and we'll be glad to continue the conversation and dig into the data even more as we go forward.
You got a few questions. Chairman Hamilton. Is that not you? Representative Watson. Just out of habit.
Yeah, this is just a friendly question. What is our overweight, oversized permit? Do we have one in the state now, and how does that work? And is there a certain number that are applied every year? Or can you explain how the overweight, over permit?
There are overweight, oversized permits that are allowed by state code, and they are the same kind of scenario goes through when those permit requests come in. The bridge folks have to go through and look at those routes and determine each bridge if it can handle that load for whatever that is. Sometimes there's a super loads, 100,000 pounds or so, but it's a calculation on each one of them, the entire route, in fact, and those do happen. The number I don't have off the top of my head of how many we get in a year, but they do exist.
Are there time limits on those, or are they annually, yearly, 6 months, or specific? One day?
There's a delineation by weight, of how many can be one trip or could be annual as well. So there are allowances for annual, but each of those routes, again, is evaluated on a one-off situation.
Representative Geisinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm fascinated with what you're telling us, but let's talk a little R&D. That's reaching and dreaming. How much would it cost to take care of those 1,800 bridges that you have that are posted today?
That's a great R&D question. I would put more of it in the dream category. Let's take a very simple county road bridge. To replace it somewhere costs us just a very simple, take the bridge out, put it back. That's probably about a $3 to $5 million proposition for a very simple bridge. As we talk about the federal bridge program, and every municipality has needs, we're replacing Spring Street right over here, on the other side of the Phillips Arena. That's pretty much the budget for the entire year for a bridge, for our federal funding that's available. When you have bridges of that magnitude, which is a very vital bridge for the city. So they come in all shapes, sizes, and formats. They're very simple, $3 to $5 million, all the way up to tens and 20 millions of dollars when you get into the bigger bridges or the bridges over the rivers and things like that. We've got a couple of state route bridges now that's over some significant water, and they're in the $20 to $30 million range.
When you submit your state budget, do you ask for more than you get?
Well, we make an ask, and our ask really is to match what federal money's there. We're using our money as wisely as possible from the state budget to leverage the federal. And again, that federal has some uncertainty to it going forward at this juncture, but we're very, very proudful that we leverage all our state dollars to use all our federal money.
What you're saying then is that the federal money goes into the general fund rather than into a designated fund for bridges or roads?
No, sir. The federal money comes in nice, neat buckets that has lots of rules and regs in them. But the bridge money, from a federal point of view, is an 80% proposition. We'll take 20% of our state motor fuel money out of our budget that matches 80 cents of the federal. And so you just have to have your bridges are lined up in each federal program, which there used to be a dozen, basically a bucket for bridges, for bridge replacement. That got merged into some other categories, which now they just compete with normal road projects, what have you. Which is, again, I'll give my tip of my hat to the planning director for maintaining that same level, even though the federal requirement went away.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one more question. Of that money, the federal money, are we getting enough matching money to match those dollars?
Yes, sir.
From the state?
Yes, sir.
And that's all we're getting. In the gasoline tax, how much fall off are we having year to year now?
It's been up and down over the last few years. Just slightly south of $1 billion, which is a lot of money. And I think if we've got to adjust it back, was right at just slightly ticked above $1 billion, but it's been $900 million to $1 billion over this economic decline, where before growth was like this year over year, 2007 on, it's just ticked up and down, up and down. It has not really seen any, you might as well call it flat if you averaged it out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Watson had a friendly question. I know this is going to come a shock to you and everybody else, but I'm not an engineer. So, but, however, I think the gym clip, and I appreciate you bringing that out because that put it in an example I can understand. But I think that might have proved my point. It took you a bunch of wiggles to break it. If you open it and just wiggled it a couple times, it's still intact. So less loads going over a bridge, if we're going to compare that to a wiggle, would equal less breakage.
Depends on the pressure that you put on the gym clip. So I could have put more pressure on it and broke it in less wiggles.
Okay.
And it's a determination. Again, it's sort of back to why I thought it was important to understand that a bridge, when they were designed, assuming they were designed properly, most of the bridges that on the county roads were not designed to state route standards. There's old, what was called a HS-15 loading, which was designed for less weight already. And so, therefore, theoretically, you can't get more load across of them. And that's why so many of them are posted, because in today's weights, as in law today, already require those to be posted. So, you know, the additional 570 bridges with 89.5 just adds the number of those. And so that gives you concern that, well, obviously you're going to route around those. So therefore your routes have to change. And again, that's sort of part of, is it effective? You know, if the reroute, you know, does that make sense or not from an economics point of view? And I think that's part of some more research.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else wish to have any kind of comments? Whichever one wants to go first.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Steve McWilliams. I'm with the Georgia Forestry Association, and I certainly appreciate all the comments about the importance of forestry in this state, and I appreciate Representative Nimmer bringing this idea forward, putting it on the table for discussion. It's a long overdue discussion that we need to have in this state. You know, Georgia's blessed with more commercial timberland than any other state in this country. That's really a surprise to a lot of people. The forest product manufacturing industry in our state contributes $28 billion a year to the state's economy. You, as a General Assembly, have been very kind for many, many years in terms of adopting policy in this state that works well for timberland owners and tree farmers, as well as for the forest product manufacturing sector. But quite frankly, if forest owners do not have markets for their trees, they won't grow trees. If forest product manufacturers don't have the resource, they won't site their facilities here or continue to operate their facilities here. But in the middle there, the transporting from the woods to the mills is an area that we don't talk about very much. And it is the area of this whole string, this whole chain that is feeling the most pressure. All of that to say that this is a very, very timely discussion. And we as an industry, both from the landowner standpoint and the mill standpoint, and our loggers and our wood dealers in the state look forward to being a part of it going forward. So we appreciate very much this initiative.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. You're next.
Mr. Chairman, Sean Adams with ACCG. Floor Leader, appreciate you bringing this, like everyone else has said. You know, historically from the county perspective, as it was mentioned from GDOT earlier, majority of the roads in the state are county maintained actually, and so when these bills have come up in the past, even prior to my time, the concerns typically from the county perspective deals with safety and also with the increased cost of maintenance that are involved with it. So we're happy to hear that, and you've said it before and you've told it to us that, you know, increased weights isn't necessarily the answer, but it needs to be a part of the discussion. So we're happy to have that discussion. We look forward to having an off-session conversation with all the stakeholders. We think economic development is important. We understand that's a perspective you're coming from. And so we just want to extend our appreciation. We know we're going to have a larger transportation discussion in the off-session as well. I think this is definitely a part of that. And so we look forward to it. Whatever we can do to help with our resources as well in terms of data and numbers, we'll be happy to provide it. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, you got off easy. Next.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mark Middleton. I'm here on behalf of the Georgia Railroad Association, and as Representative Nimmer, joked at the beginning, it's an issue that the industry's been engaged in the past, but we're anxious and appreciative of the opportunity to sit down and have a discussion, and we're ready to move forward in good faith on this. Our association has members that are Class 1 operators, and then, of course, we have a couple of dozen short line. And from a competitive standpoint, people have different perspectives on it. But I think one common denominator is the safety issue, and that ties in a little bit to the infrastructure issues that the gentlemen from the department we're talking about. And so we look forward to being part of the conversation. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Smith? All right. All right, just come on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Justin Kernan. I'm with the Georgia Municipal Association, and thank you, Representative Nimmer, for bringing this bill. We appreciate the intent behind the bill. However, as everyone knows, that the increased weight could potentially damage more streets and roads, and the few roads that are not maintained by the federal government, the state, or the county are maintained by municipalities. And we would like the opportunity to work with the author off session and continue to have the conversation about how we can move goods throughout this state without putting the burden on mostly the county and municipal roads. So, thank you.
Any questions, Justin? All right. Who we got next? Mr. Giles, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Giles. I'm president of Georgia Poultry Federation. Our members are the poultry processors, growers, and allied members. And as others have said, Representative Nimmer, we appreciate the bill being introduced and to start the discussion. Efficiency of live production. When I say that, the growing and feeding of the birds is one of the most important measures of competitiveness between states and with producers in other countries. Feed delivery and the live production itself. There's been a lot of discussion of numbers and loads and whatnot. I thought I'd just give you a scale. Georgia's the largest producer of chicken in the United States and really largest poultry producing region in the world. In order to feed and take those chickens to processing each day, we process 30 million pounds of chicken a day. That takes about 2,400 truck trips, picking up chickens and delivering feed per day. If you calculate that out for a year, that's 630,000 trips in a year. If you just added 5,000 more pounds to each one of those, we're talking about 3.2 billion pounds potentially that could be delivered with our same infrastructure. And that translates to about 80,000 loads. And I'm not suggesting that would be all those would be saved, but that's the kind of scale we're talking about just with our industry, just with that side of the business. So again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we look forward to the discussion in any way that we can provide information during the summer and fall. We'd be glad to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. Any questions? None? Anybody else? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Nimmer, I've listened to the conversation that's about to take place over the summer. It's moved from a conversation to a full-scale convention. And it's going to be interesting.
Well, you want us to meet down there in your area?
I think that one place in the state that can truly accommodate you will be around Midway and Hinesville.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate that invitation. Is your wife going to cook when we come?
Sir, I lost control of that years ago.
I'll discuss it with her tonight at dinner, okay? Representative Watson.
Yes, I just had a question for my good friend down there about this bill and this list of things that are on here. I noticed there's some other items that are missing, and I'm a little concerned about it. I'm not seeing things like cattle and fertilizer and peanuts and corn and even vegetables, so I was just curious about that.
Chair had some of the same concerns herself about it, Representative Watson, and I think if we move forward, I think we might have to take care of that. In fact, I think I've already got it written in on B, hauling live poultry or raw agricultural products. So that would be some wording that would have to come in there as well. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. No. You've had your chance. All right, we'll wrap this thing up with Representative Nimmer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everybody, the members that have come. Obviously, everybody knew this was a bill that was not going to take any legislative action as far as the vote goes this year. And so your commitment to come to this committee and listen to it, offer your input, and get educated on what the issue is means a lot to me. It means a lot to the stakeholders across the state of Georgia. Those of you in the audience that have come and spoken on your concerns and your encouragement, that's what the intent was. Representative Williams, it will be a full-scale convention. One of the things I just do want to say, this is my 5th session. This has been a conversation every year that I've been up here, and we have not had a serious get at the table, let's get it done and move on resolution to this issue. So Representative Watson, you'll have plenty of time to get your input, get your draft ready, and I'm sure the chair's behind you, it sounds like, so I imagine that's a pretty persuasive arm there. But I am serious about this. We are going to move forward with the chair's discretion, and from my understanding, he's supportive of trying to address these issues and making sure that everybody is given adequate opportunity to address the concerns of efficiency, economic development, and most importantly, the safety of the people in Georgia. And I'm looking forward to it, looking forward to going down to Dorchester Plantation in Midway and having Representative Williams treat us all there. Did I understand that? We will be treated. But no, I do look forward to further conversations. I would encourage you, don't let the year get late. Everybody knows how to reach everybody in this room. Everybody has email addresses on this panel up here. You guys, most of you have cell phones for all of us. Go ahead and start the conversation. Tell us your concern. Give us some real solutions, some real resolve to what we're talking about. That's all we're asking, so that when we come back next year, I'm not looking at day 28 and 29 trying to make a motion to get a bill dropped and have this happen again, okay? I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Thank you there, Representative Nimmer. And we're going to try to get out some. We're going to have a few meetings, and we are going to have some around the state this year. I think it is important for our metro legislators to see the rural parts of the state and understand this is God's country, yeah, and understand what gnats are about and all those kind of things. But no, to see the other part of the state, and also I think we as rural legislators need to also come in, like we were talking about the other day with Representative Gardner, and look at some of the things that's going on here around the metropolitan area. Representative Bentley, do you want to say something? We appreciate you coming.
Yes, sir, I would love to say something.
Okay, but you got to get to the mic. We want to hear you on TV. Like the hat. I know. I tell you what.
Good afternoon. This is Patty Bentley from House District 139, the home of the Georgia Strawberry Festival. So I just want to say, if you're out this summer going around the state, please come on down to Taylor County for the Strawberry Festival, which will be held in April. We'll love to host you there and have this discussion. I'm a former county commissioner, so I'm really interested in this discussion. I was a part of this discussion a couple years ago, Representative Nimmer, back when I was a commissioner. So I'm really interested and would like to be a part of that.
And if we pass the gun bill, come on down to Butler Automotive down there, and you can do some shopping there while we're there.
That's right. Come on. Come on to Butler as well. So we got a lot going on in Taylor County. Mark your calendars. The 4th weekend in April, the Strawberry Festival.
For those of y'all who don't know, it's not an automotive place. It is, but I mean, it's got a lot of, it's got some auto, I shouldn't say that because they are an automotive place, but they have a lot of firearms there too as well at good prices, might I add. I have heard. I've been there a time or two myself. But with that, any other committee members wish to be heard? Chair hearing none, I recognize a motion that we adjourn. Got one, and I'll have a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, of course, there are none. And we'll see y'all later on tonight. Have a good night.